After millions of years of living as hunter-gatherers, what finally pushed humans to abandon their ancient way of life? The answer wasn't a single miracle or a sudden invention. It was the result of climate change, necessity, and human curiosity working together. Around 12,900 years ago, Earth entered a period scientists call the Younger Dryas. Temperatures suddenly dropped, and many regions became colder and drier. Forests shrank, grasslands changed, and many of the large animals that humans depended on for food began to disappear. For hunter-gatherer communities, this created a serious crisis. Traditional food sources became harder to find, and survival grew increasingly difficult. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Abu Huraira in modern-day Syria suggests that people faced major food shortages during this period. They could no longer rely entirely on hunting and gathering. Somewhere during this struggle, humans noticed something remarkable. Perhaps a few seeds accidentally fell onto fertile soil near a campsite. After rainfall, new plants began to grow from those same seeds. What seemed like a simple observation would eventually become one of the greatest discoveries in human history. People slowly realized that seeds were not just food, they were the source of future food. Instead of constantly searching for plants in the wild, they could intentionally plant seeds and grow crops close to where they lived. This understanding marked the beginning of agriculture. When the Younger Dryas finally ended and the climate became warmer and more stable, conditions for farming improved dramatically. Humans now had both the knowledge and the environmental conditions needed to cultivate crops successfully. The earliest large-scale farming developed in a region historians call the Fertile Crescent. This area stretched across parts of modern-day Israel, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. The region was rich in fertile soil and watered by major rivers such as the Tigris and Euphrates. Wild wheat and barley grew naturally across much of the landscape. Around 10,000 BCE, people in this region began intentionally planting, harvesting, and storing these grains. This moment is often called the Neolithic Revolution. The first farmers cultivated crops such as wheat, barley, lentils, peas, and chickpeas. Over many generations, they unknowingly practiced selective breeding by saving seeds from the strongest and most productive plants. As a result, wild plants gradually evolved into the domesticated crops we know today. Agriculture also drove technological innovation. Polished stone tools replaced many older hunting tools. Farmers developed digging tools for preparing soil, sickles for harvesting grain, and grinding stones for turning grain into flour. These inventions made farming more efficient and productive. At the same time, agriculture emerged independently in other parts of the world. In China, people began cultivating rice along the Yangtze River. In the Americas, communities domesticated maize, beans, and squash. Across parts of Africa, farmers grew sorghum and millet. The agricultural revolution was not a single event. It was a global transformation that occurred in different regions at different times. The Indian subcontinent also played an important role in this story. One of the earliest farming settlements in South Asia was Mehrgarh, located in present-day Balochistan, Pakistan. Archaeological discoveries show that people there were cultivating wheat and barley and raising sheep and goats as early as 7000 BCE. Mehrgarh predates the Indus Valley civilization by thousands of years and provides some of the earliest evidence of farming in the region. Excavations have uncovered mud brick houses, grain storage facilities, stone tools, and even some of the world's earliest evidence of cotton cultivation. As agriculture expanded, another challenge emerged: how to store food safely. This need led to the invention of pottery. Early farmers learned to shape clay into containers and harden them with fire, creating durable vessels for storing grain and water. With crops in the fields, tools in their hands, and food stored for the future, humanity had entered a completely new era. Humans were no longer simply surviving in nature, they were beginning to shape it. For thousands of years, humans were merely guests on Earth. We wandered through vast forests and endless grasslands, living one day at a time. Every morning began with the same question: would we find food today? Life was a constant struggle for survival. We were either hunters or prey. Our eyes searched the skies for dangerous predators, and our ears listened carefully for hidden threats in the wilderness. There were no cities, no villages, and no permanent homes. Caves and temporary shelters offered only brief protection. Survival was the only goal. Then, around 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened, something that changed the course of human history forever. As the last ice age was coming to an end and the climate was changing, our ancestors discovered a simple but powerful secret hidden in nature. It was a discovery that transformed wandering hunters into farmers, nomads into settlers, and small tribes into civilizations. This is the story of agriculture, the invention that built the modern world. Imagine a world with no farms, no roads, no supermarkets, and no cities. Humans lived in small groups, constantly moving in search of food and water. They hunted animals, gathered fruits, nuts, and roots, and followed the rhythms of nature. Life was difficult. Hunger was common. Dangerous animals were everywhere. Yet our ancestors were skilled survivors. They understood plants, tracked animals, predicted weather, and mastered fire. For thousands of generations, this way of life remained unchanged. Then climate change forced people to adapt. Around 12,000 years ago, a period known as the Younger Dryas brought colder and drier conditions across much of the world. Forests shrank, food became scarce, and many large animals disappeared. Faced with this challenge, humans began noticing something remarkable. Seeds that accidentally fell onto fertile soil would sprout into new plants. Gradually, people realized they could grow food instead of endlessly searching for it. This simple observation sparked one of the greatest revolutions in history. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people began cultivating wheat and barley. Similar developments occurred independently in China, Africa, and the Americas. For the first time, humans were producing food rather than simply collecting it. Agriculture brought enormous changes. People settled permanently in villages. Homes became permanent. Food surpluses allowed populations to grow. Animals such as sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs were domesticated. Pottery was invented to store grain. New tools were developed to cultivate and harvest crops. As food became more abundant, not everyone needed to farm. Some became craftsmen, builders, traders, and leaders. Villages grew into towns. Towns became cities. Cities became civilizations. Agriculture laid the foundation for governments, trade, writing, science, and technology. But this revolution came at a cost. Early farmers often had less varied diets than hunter-gatherers. Diseases spread more easily in crowded settlements. Hard physical labor became a daily reality. Agriculture also introduced social inequality. Land, wealth, and resources could now be owned, accumulated, and fought over. Yet despite these challenges, farming allowed human populations to grow far beyond what hunting and gathering could support. Today, every city, nation, and technological achievement traces its roots back to that first seed planted thousands of years ago. The food on your plate, the home you live in, and even the device you're using right now exist because our ancestors learned how to cultivate the land. Agriculture did more than feed humanity. It gave us the time and stability needed to innovate, create, explore, and build the modern world. It remains one of the most important discoveries in human history, a discovery that forever changed what it means to be human. Now, let's return to the modern world. At this very moment, you're probably watching this video on a smartphone, sitting comfortably inside your home. Maybe you've recently eaten a meal that included bread, rice, vegetables, or other foods that began their journey on a farm. It may seem ordinary, but have you ever stopped to think about how deeply your everyday life is connected to a discovery made thousands of years ago? The invention that transformed hunters into farmers was not simply another event in human history. It was the foundation upon which our entire modern world was built. The cities we live in, the governments that organize our societies, the books we read, the technologies we use, and even the global economy itself all trace their origins back to that first agricultural revolution. Without farming, humanity would have remained a species constantly searching for food. There would have been no permanent settlements, no great cities, no universities, no scientific revolutions, and no modern technology. Agriculture gave humanity something incredibly valuable: stability, and with stability came time. Time to think, time to experiment, time to create, time to write, time to build. And with every generation, that knowledge continued to grow. Once people no longer had to spend every waking moment searching for food, they could focus on other pursuits. Artists created works of beauty. Inventors developed new technologies. Philosophers explored the meaning of existence. Scientists investigated the mysteries of nature and the universe. Generation after generation, human knowledge accumulated and expanded. Villages became cities. Cities became kingdoms. Kingdoms became empires. And over thousands of years, those civilizations laid the foundations of the modern world. Of course, the story was never perfect. As we've seen, agriculture also brought inequality, disease, environmental challenges, and conflict. Many of those issues continue to affect us today. Climate change threatens food production across the globe. Modern industrial farming places enormous pressure on ecosystems. Nations still compete over land, water, and resources. The challenges have changed, but the connection to agriculture remains. Yet the deeper lesson of this story goes beyond farming itself. The true significance of agriculture lies in what it reveals about human nature. Our greatest strength has never been physical power. We are not the fastest animals. We are not the strongest. What makes us unique is our ability to observe, learn, adapt, and transform ideas into reality. At some point, thousands of years ago, an ordinary person noticed a simple truth: a seed could become a plant. That observation may have seemed small, but it changed the destiny of our species. One idea, one discovery, one seed. That was all it took. A simple observation that changed the destiny of our species forever. From that tiny seed grew villages, cities, kingdoms, empires, science, technology, and the modern world itself. The story of human civilization began not with a sword, a king, or a monument, but with a seed placed carefully into the soil thousands of years ago. The world we know today exists because countless generations of people experimented, learned from nature, and dared to imagine a different future. So the next time you sit down for a meal, take a moment to remember those first farmers. They never knew what their actions would lead to. They could not have imagined skyscrapers, computers, satellites, or the internet. Yet every one of those achievements can be traced back to the fields they planted and the seeds they carefully placed into the soil. Their courage, curiosity, and determination changed the course of human history forever, and their legacy lives on in every meal we eat, every city we build, and every dream we pursue. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the origins of civilization. If you enjoyed this exploration of human history, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. In your opinion, what was the most important invention after agriculture? We'd love to hear your answer. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep discovering the remarkable story of humanity. By now, the story of agriculture may sound like an unstoppable success story, a discovery that lifted humanity from uncertainty and placed us on the path to civilization. But was it really that simple? Did this incredible progress come without a price? Some historians and anthropologists argue that agriculture was not humanity's greatest achievement, but perhaps its greatest mistake. One of the most famous supporters of this idea was anthropologist Jared Diamond, who famously described agriculture as the worst mistake in the history of the human race. At first, that sounds shocking. After all, agriculture gave us cities, governments, technology, and modern civilization. So why would anyone call it a mistake? The answer lies in the hidden costs of this revolution. The first major problem was nutrition. Hunter-gatherers consumed a remarkably diverse diet. They ate fruits, nuts, roots, vegetables, fish, and wild game, providing a wide range of nutrients. Early farmers, however, became heavily dependent on a small number of crops such as wheat, rice, or maize. While these crops provided plenty of calories, they often lacked nutritional diversity. Studies of ancient human skeletons reveal an interesting pattern. Early agricultural populations were often shorter than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. They also suffered from more tooth decay and signs of nutritional deficiencies. In many cases, farming provided more food, but not necessarily better food. The second problem was vulnerability. Hunter-gatherers relied on many different food sources. If one resource became scarce, they could adapt and find alternatives. Farmers, however, depended heavily on their crops. A drought, flood, pest infestation, or crop disease could destroy an entire harvest. When that happened, entire communities faced starvation. Agriculture created food security under normal conditions, but it also created the possibility of devastating famines. The third major consequence was disease. For most of human history, people lived in small, scattered groups. Infectious diseases struggled to spread because populations were limited and mobile. Agriculture changed that. Permanent villages and growing cities brought large numbers of people together in crowded environments. At the same time, humans began living closely with domesticated animals. This created opportunities for diseases to jump from animals to humans. Many illnesses that later plagued civilizations, including forms of influenza, measles, and smallpox, are believed to have originated through close contact with domesticated animals. The rise of agriculture helped create the conditions for epidemics and pandemics. The fourth cost was labor. Many researchers believe that hunter-gatherers spent fewer hours obtaining food than early farmers. Farmers faced endless work. Fields needed to be cleared, planted, watered, protected, harvested, and stored. The work was physically demanding and repetitive. Ancient skeletons often show signs of joint damage, arthritis, and physical stress caused by years of agricultural labor. In many ways, farming made daily life harder, not easier. Perhaps the most significant consequence of all was inequality. In hunter-gatherer societies, resources were generally shared among the group. But agriculture allowed wealth to be accumulated. Land could be owned, grain could be stored, animals could be counted as property. Some individuals gained control over more resources than others. As wealth became concentrated, social classes emerged. Powerful elites gained influence over ordinary people. Kings ruled over subjects. Landowners controlled resources. The gap between rich and poor continued to grow. Agriculture also contributed to organized warfare. When land and stored food became valuable, communities began competing for resources. Villages fought villages, kingdoms fought kingdoms. Empires rose and fell through conflict. Many of the wars that shaped human history were ultimately struggles over land, food, and resources made valuable by agriculture. So is farming truly a mistake? Perhaps not. The reality is more complicated. Agriculture was a trade-off. Humans exchanged mobility for stability. They traded equality for complexity. They accepted harder labor in return for larger populations and permanent settlements. Once agriculture supported growing populations, there was no easy way back. A hunter-gatherer lifestyle could not sustain millions of people. Civilization became dependent on farming. The choice was no longer whether to farm, but how to manage the world that farming had created. Agriculture gave humanity extraordinary opportunities, but it also introduced challenges that continue to shape our lives today. It was neither a perfect blessing nor a complete mistake. It was one of the most powerful transformations in human history, a revolution that changed everything. The invention of agriculture did far more than provide a reliable food supply. It transformed every aspect of human society and laid the foundation for the world we live in today. The first major change was permanence. For countless generations, hunter-gatherers had lived a nomadic lifestyle, constantly moving in search of food and water. Farmers, however, needed to stay close to their fields. Crops required planting, care, protection, and harvesting. As a result, people began settling in one place for longer periods of time. Temporary camps gradually evolved into permanent villages. Some of the world's earliest known settlements, including Jericho in the Middle East and Mehrgar in South Asia, emerged during this period. For the first time in history, humans had permanent homes. At the same time, another revolution was taking place: animal domestication. Instead of hunting every animal they encountered, people began raising certain species for food and labor. Sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs became valuable resources. These animals provided meat, milk, wool, leather, and eventually labor for farming and transportation. As agricultural techniques improved, farmers started producing more food than they immediately needed. This surplus changed everything. In hunter-gatherer societies, nearly everyone had to participate in finding food. But with agriculture producing extra grain, some people could focus on other tasks. This led to the rise of specialization. Some individuals became potters, creating storage containers and household goods. Others became toolmakers, builders, weavers, traders, or religious leaders. For the first time, entire communities could support people whose primary job was not producing food. Society became increasingly complex. Trade networks expanded as villages exchanged goods, tools, and resources. Communities grew larger and more interconnected, but agriculture also introduced a new concept that had barely existed before: private property. Farmers began claiming ownership of land, crops, animals, and stored grain. The idea of "this belongs to me" gradually became an important part of society. As some families accumulated more land and resources than others, social differences began to emerge. Wealth and power became concentrated in the hands of certain individuals and groups. This marked the beginning of social inequality. As settlements continued to grow, people needed systems to maintain order and resolve disputes. Who would protect grain stores? Who would organize irrigation projects? Who would settle disagreements between families? These challenges led to the rise of leadership structures. Village chiefs, religious authorities, and eventually kings gained influence over larger populations. Over time, governments began to emerge. Rules, laws, and organized systems of administration developed to manage increasingly complex societies. Agriculture also fueled an unprecedented population boom. Hunter-gatherer groups were usually small because constant movement limited the number of children families could care for. In permanent settlements, however, families could raise more children successfully. A stable food supply allowed populations to grow rapidly. Villages expanded into towns. Towns evolved into cities. Cities became the centers of powerful civilizations. The great civilizations of ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China all depended on agriculture. Without farming, none of these societies could have existed. Agriculture also encouraged innovation. As societies became larger and more organized, humans developed writing systems, mathematics, engineering, astronomy, and complex trade networks. Monuments, temples, roads, and irrigation systems were built. Knowledge could now be recorded and passed from one generation to the next. Human civilization entered a completely new phase of development. The world was changing faster than ever before. What began as a simple observation about seeds growing in the soil had transformed into a force that reshaped humanity itself. Yet despite all its benefits, agriculture came with significant costs. The same revolution that created cities, governments, and civilizations would also bring new challenges that humans had never faced before. And those challenges would shape the next chapter of our story.